Welcome to LobbyComply Pod from State and Federal Communications. We are your source for lobbying, compliance, ethics, campaign finance, and election news from across the country. Hello, this is Elizabeth Bartz, President and CEO of State and Federal Communications. Let me transfer you to Joe May, who will introduce this week's podcast.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Welcome back to LobbyComply Pod, Michael.
Thank you, Joe. I'm Michael Beckett, Director of Research Services at State and Federal Communications.
First, let me ask, why would I need to think about lobbying rules if my company is just seeking to do business with a place and not trying to affect any policy change?
Once upon a time, lobbying was only associated with advocating for legislation or regulations. More recently, states have broadened definitions regarding lobbying to include procurement activities. Over half the states now have some form of regulation to cover procurement lobbying. Also, keep in mind, some of the biggest and best contracts at the city and county level may require legislative action to get approved. So now you're back to legislative lobbying for a procurement contract locally.
Would my state registration cover my local procurement activities?
It depends. Some states have lobbying laws covering both state and local procurement activity. But there's variation even in those states. If you're seeking business in New York City, for example, you may need to register with the state and the city for the same activity. Lobbying in Chicago? Well, the state offers a carve-out exception for lobbying in the Windy City, but the city itself requires you to register.
Tell me, Michael, is it common for procurement activities to be covered in local jurisdictions with their own lobbying law?
Local laws are following the trend at the state level to include procurement lobbying. The newer the lobbying law, the more likely it is to cover procurement lobbying. Additionally, local agencies, for example, LA Metro Transit Authority, Miami-Dade Local School District, these agencies often have local level lobbying laws. And if you're in a local agency with a lobbying law, it most always is going to cover your procurement activities.
So how do I know if my procurement activities require lobbyist registration in a local jurisdiction that has a lobbying law?
Believe it or not, it's pretty rare to find words like procurement lobbying in local codes and publications. Local jurisdictions may not have the resources often available at the state level. There may not be a published fact sheet or lobbying manual to consult. Generally, you'll want to start with definitions. You want to review the definitions, and these definitions may only include words like government action or official action. Then you've got to review the definition for government action to search for words like contract and doing business. And once you determine the law covers procurement lobbying, now you start to look for exceptions or thresholds to registration.
Are there common exceptions or thresholds to look for?
Yeah, so even if your activity qualifies as lobbying, many local jurisdictions have the same thresholds for procurement lobbying as they do for other types of lobbying. These typically will have a compensation and or expenditure threshold. These are helpful, right? Did I make this much? Did I spend this much? If so, I've got to register. Two of my favorite local thresholds are both in Michigan. Detroit and Flint say, got to register if you spend $1,000 for lobbying or $250 on a single covered official. Nothing unique here, right? These are pretty standard thresholds. But then there's also a bullet point that says if you lobby in the city and are registered elsewhere, maybe a different state, maybe at the federal level, if you're registered anywhere, you need to register with the city, regardless of how much you spend on lobbying there.
Any exceptions or thresholds specific to local procurement lobbying?
Some local jurisdictions carve out exceptions for sales activities. Baltimore, Maryland exempts a bona fide salesperson or commercial selling agency. Good luck finding definitions for bona fide salesperson anywhere you're at, but there they are, they're exceptions. San Francisco has limited exceptions for your in-house people who are seeking to be a party to a contract, but the exceptions would not apply to your contract lobbyists or outside consultants.
Well, this analysis seems like a lot of work if I'm active in several jurisdictions.
It absolutely can be a lot of work, and no one likes to do this work alone. The team at State and Federal Communications has decades of experience answering local procurement lobbying questions. Please just let us know if we can help.
Michael, thank you for being with us today on LobbyComply Pod. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Joe. Happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to LobbyComply Pod from State and Federal Communications. For more news, visit LobbyComply.com. To learn more about how we can guide you along the road to compliance, visit stateandfed.com.